What a week it has been in the United States. Let's head there and catch up with Associate Professor at the University of South Alabama, Thomas Adams. Thomas, Donald Trump in court in New York, just quite extraordinary, wasn't it?
Just an incredible week, especially for this time of year in American politics. First, on Tuesday, of course, we saw Donald Trump being the first former president ever to be indicted, and indicted on over 30 counts of various crimes related to document fraud and relation, of course, to his paying off of Stormy Daniels. This is, it's a fascinating moment. Donald Trump's running for the Republican nomination right now. And on the one hand, this is incredibly good for Donald Trump. Donald Trump's always done really well, especially with Republicans when the story's about him. And you saw this even in kind of polling before the indictment. A Yahoo News YouGov poll had him at about 47% of Republican voters. And after the indictment, he came to 57%, right? So, and that's well over 50% is what he needs. And it puts his opponents, people like Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, really kind of particular. They can't attack him. In fact, they're trying to kind of one up themselves to support him, in fact, but they're trying to support the person they're running against. And again, that just leaves kind of Trump at the head of the party. And so, in a weird way, it's a very good week for Donald Trump. It's also a really good week for Democrats, I think, because in that regard, because Donald Trump is a much easier candidate for Joe Biden to run against in 2024. He's beaten him once already. Donald Trump has been a kind of a weight on the party in the last midterm elections in 2022. His endorsed candidates did incredibly horribly. People he came out to support kind of uniformly lost. The upper echelons of the Republican Party, people like Mitch McConnell, I think would just as soon Donald Trump go away. But things like this indictment just more mobilize his base of support and make it that much more likely he's going to stick around.
The judge did say, without giving explicit instructions, to keep a low profile, and he hasn't done that. He said, I'm going to play dirty. How does this all play out?
Yeah, I think he's, is one really, he's going to put this front and center. He's going to say his persecution and his supposed persecution at the hands of the New York District Attorney, at the hands of Democrats more broadly, is basically his biggest calling card, that you need to support him or else. And again, it's going to put people like Ron DeSantis in a major bind. And of course, he's going to try to kind of use the theater of it. Donald Trump is nothing if not a master of kind of using theater, using video, using kind of big rallies, but also using grievance. And the grievances, in this case, he embodies all sorts of grievance. So, from his perspective, a trial right before the first primaries kick off next January and February in Iowa and New Hampshire would be a huge boon for him and really make it a kind of fait accompli that he's the Republican nominee.
He's got a few legal problems in other parts of the United States. He needs to get through this one first. People watching from outside in, generally speaking, when someone goes to court, they get charged. Often when they're found guilty, they can end up in jail. Like, what is the possible and probable outcome here?
Yeah, look, he's got all sorts of legal troubles in the state of Georgia. He's got perhaps a pending indictment as well regarding his attempt to overthrow the election results there. He's got the cases at the federal level involving both January 6th and the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol, as well as his mishandling and taking of classified documents back to Mar-a-Lago. And so all this stuff might kind of begin to kind of roll down the pipe is in the next few months. Politically speaking, though, in some ways, I think all of that helps him. There's no one in America has not made up their mind about Donald Trump. This only basically forces, to some degree, a lot of Republicans who might otherwise look somewhere else, look to Ron DeSantis and say, no, we've got to support this guy. And at the kind of general election level, again, I think it really is good for Democrats. And Donald Trump, again, is going to say to his supporters, the only way to keep me out of jail, the only way to end this persecution is to reelect me as president so I can pardon myself.
It's been interesting to see the commentary in and around this from all sorts of people, those that were former workers for Donald Trump, communications operative that I saw on a interview here in Australia, saying that there's every chance he might step away. Now, others say fiercely that won't happen. He is 77 next birthday. If this does wear him down, what do you think?
Yeah, Donald Trump has never been one to step away from the limelight. His entire career has been to run towards it. And this, again, trains the limelight on him more so. And again, at a moment when it seemed like he might be kind of losing some of that, right? Ron DeSantis was starting to poll better, even passed him in a couple state-based polls for the Republican nomination. And this gives him that kind of ability to kind of run back into the spotlight to make the story about him. And again, Donald Trump loves nothing better than when folks are talking about him. And right now, folks are talking about him all over the country and all over the world.
One of the hardest things to watch for us in Australia and all around the world, and I'm sure in the United States, is constant stories of school shootings and innocent people being killed. It seems that gun control, again, has been at the centre of attention in Washington this week.
Yeah, Washington, especially at the state level. In Tennessee, 3 members of the state legislature there were expelled actually after they participated in a protest, basically demanding more effective gun control legislation following the shooting in Nashville. They were expelled by the kind of supermajority of Republicans in the state legislature, and somewhat for kind of no reason. It was or 2 of them were expelled. One of them did not get expelled, excuse me, by 1 vote. For no reason. They had basically had no voice in that legislature. They simply, were a very solid minority. And I think that, as well as issues we've seen this week around abortion in Wisconsin and the election of the state Supreme Court judge there, a ruling that just came down last night that perhaps will prohibit the abortion pill nationwide. These things play really well at the kind of Republican base level in the United States. They don't play well in national elections in swing states. And the results in Wisconsin we saw, for instance, that judge ran ahead of Joe Biden by 6 points in an election that was simply basically about abortion. Same thing with guns in a lot of ways. At the kind of national level, more than 65% of Americans are effectively demanding real action on gun control. But the benefits at the Republican Party level of kind of pandering to no gun control whatsoever are really stark at the level of getting nominations, at the level of winning election in districts across places like Tennessee, across places like Florida, across places like Texas. But again, at the national political level, it's really kind of going to hamstring them.
As a citizen, just finally, as an individual, and I'd like to ask this question, it must be just gobsmacking to see the constant crime, the constant evil moments that happen that cause so much grief, so much heartache.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it comes on like clockwork. It just feels like, it's been a few weeks since we had one, and then boom, once again. It's hit home for me a little this week too. Just personally, at my own university, we had our faculty had our first active shooter drill, and our first active shooter training. And I taught in Australia for 10 years, and then never coming back to the United States and never experienced that, and had a 3-hour kind of training to what to do in that case. And the fact that that is now, just standard at schools, at shopping malls, that folks are learning this is just a kind of constant reminder that, it's always a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to believe. Thomas, on a brighter note, happy Easter. Thanks so much for coming on the program, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Tim, yeah, happy Easter to you.